I'll turn my volume up. And there we go. Those are odd. Maybe I've been recording this wrong the whole time. Anyway, greetings and salutations, travelers. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and welcome back to the Around the Hearth. Today we're going to be talking about the Trap blog and the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Trap blog, and we're going to be talking about the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Sorcerer blog, which is pretty cool. We get to see Sorcerers now. It's going to be, they're looking pretty powerful. Pretty cool. First, though, a disclaimer. This is an adult podcast that sometimes features certain adults that use adult language. You have been warned.
Well, Kane's not here, so I think we're all right, but thanks, Dad.
Yeah, the Pathfather has spoken. For our announcements, less than 5 minutes. You can time me. Here we go. Patreon for Black Dragon Gaming and the Inn of Planar Crossroads is going on right now. $50 a month at the Inn of Planar Crossroads. Once we reach that benchmark, is going to give away a rulebook of the winner's choice. When we reach $100 a month patron support, we're going to give away a special edition Pathfinder 2nd Edition rulebook. So that's dropping very soon, and they're already charged to my account. So it's on the edge. We're on the cusp of the playtest. It's going to be awesome. We already know what we're talking about today, but our next subscriber appreciation one-shot is going to be at 400. By the time this goes live, when this goes live, we should be recording our 200 subscriber one-shot that we gave away. So every time we double, that means we're doing one at 200. We're going to do one at 400. So 400 is next, and Colin is supposed to run it with his very fun, odd campaign, one-shot. And this month's giveaway is patrons of giant tier or higher will get a chance to win, randomly get a chance to win all 27 episodes of the Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning cartoon, the animated series. I have been told that it's horrendous and is gloriously so. So you can look forward to that should you win. But I had to get it when I was at the con. And that's all that we have going right now as far as announcements. So let's get right in. And we definitely made it less than 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You did it. Yeah.
All right. Let's switch over and talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition and traps. So traps look pretty cool. As long as you can get them to go off, they look cool. I kind of had the same statement when we were talking about hunters. Not hunters, but they may as well be called hunters, the rangers of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So, let me see. Tommy, what do you think about these traps?
I think someone had too much time on their hands when they put together the Armageddon, I forget what it's called. I don't want to say Armageddon device because I know that's wrong. But the Rovagug's blood drop that does way too much damage to everything but you.
The Armageddon orb?
That was Armageddon orb. Yes, that's it. That's really cool. That's really powerful, and it's really flavorful. And I think traps in Pathfinder 1st Edition now are either like you see them all the time, or you never do, and I think giving them a more like codified, this is how it works, will encourage GMs to kind of like find a middle ground. For example, what was their last name in Rune Lords? The Grawl Farm. None of us expected these ogres in Rise of the well, minor Rise of the Rune Lords spoiler, but there's a lot of ogres in that book, so it'll keep you guessing. But there's a lot of traps in a place that you don't expect to be there, and then suddenly they're there, and we had a rogue to deal with them, so that's great, but a lot of times that was kind of like, that was the thing, right? Like, okay, I have a rogue, I'm jamming for this rogue. Traps. Or, on the other side of that, I don't have a rogue, I really need to kill the party. Traps. Now there's, like, everybody can respond to traps, and there's more than one way, like, rules as written to handle them, and I think that's really cool. Like with haunts, for example, how it's literally a knowledge religion or a diplomacy check to talk the haunt down, and that's super sweet because if you don't have a rogue, but your party is like paladin, cleric, cleric paladin, and you just really were super into that deity that day, you have a way to respond to that, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
One good thing I like how traps are done in second edition, you can either go very heavy into traps or not. In one game I'm currently playing in, it's based upon a mega death kill dungeon based in second edition D&D, how deadly things are, and you don't have a party rogue, the party is going to die. So having the choice in the type of traps you have for how complex they are, it's a nice thing for the GM to have access to some of the examples here. One of the traps that I eventually want to use, if I do have the chance to, it is the Armageddon Orb, rolling 10d6 damage for the distance of it. It's fantastic.
Yes, I like how the traps also, at least in the case of the Armageddon Orb, and it's really hard to not like start belting out Aerosmith every time I hear that. Just Armageddon Orb. Don't want to close my eyes. That maybe should have made it into my video. But it's like, it's cool that the traps can also drive the narrative. Like, again, as written in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it's not like the GM has to pull something out of his butt. No, this is a CR23 hazard. This is the meanest thing you've ever seen. And it also, it did show us, I don't remember the exact DC, but like to disable it, you needed like a DC 50 check to attune your stuff to Serenray and Asmodeus. And
46.
To be honest, that kind of like tips the fourth wall in Lord the Geller, and how the world's going to end just a little, because I have a Serenade and an Asmodean both literally present in this chat, so that's fun. I mean, but I think it was like a DC 50 disable device or something like that.
DC 51. That's 50.
And what that tells me is that, like, I like Pathfinder because I guess I'm compensating for something, and I really like to have like stupid high numbers. It's super sweet, and we can still do that in Pathfinder. That's end game content. And yeah, imagine that like that number's reachable. It's not like, haha, a 51? You'll never get above a 30 unless your GM homebrews it. Ha ha ha.
Well, having a 51, as long as you spec into it, that's a beatable number.
Yeah. Well,
and that, like, the blog proves that, because we see it's there and we assume that the devs want us to beat the thing.
The highest CR trap I used in Pathfinder 1st Edition, the disabled device check was like 35, 37, and this was like a CR 20 trap.
Yeah, the best trap I ever used in 1st Edition, I kind of regret using it. Well, I don't regret using it. I regret the way in which I used it, rather, because I did take, in Pathfinder, I took my whole party through the Tomb of Horrors, and I gave them a lot of second chances with the trap that's very lethal. In the Tomb of Horrors. I won't say a whole lot more because it spoils a very iconic module, but like, I think you two know what I'm talking about. I was very generous.
I think I know the trap you're talking about.
When you go up to the fortress and just go to knock and say, "Is anybody home?" and just like, yeah.
Yeah, that too. That was based off that, because you got to put the fear in the high level party.
My favorite trap of all time. The party rogue at the time when I GM'd, he had the highest perception, so he noticed this trap right away. It was the Orb of Annihilation.
Yeah, that is the trap we are talking about.
Yep. Yeah, there's one in there.
Somewhere.
There's
a place.
No spoilers for people that haven't played. That is something that
this
is
the part
unique.
where Kane would complain about us spoiling a 20-year-old module, or however old Tomb of Horrors is.
Well, I mean, it's been spoiled by other channels, but that's not what we're really here talking about anyway.
Some of the other traps that I like, that I did use rules that's written for making traps, it would be the Ray type of trap. So given any arcane spell, make a Ray version of it, such as Ray of Petrifying trap. That's one of my favorites for a party.
It can be fun. When it comes to 2nd edition, which is the main thing we're talking about today. You are correct, Tommy, that for noticing a hazard, anybody with a legendary proficiency is going to really be able to effectively find traps. Legendary proficiency comes around at earliest 15th level. So even after 15th level, if you invest feats in it, you could take it. And I believe they're general feats, so you don't have to wait every other level or something like that. You get a class feat, and every other level you get a general feat, so you don't have to wait. It's not going to be a big wait. If I'm remembering right, leveling, we'll figure it out. But legendary proficiency is not going to be something that's crazy to reach. By 15th level, you should have it. And there's 2 or 3 classes that already are going to be finding it fairly easy to get to legendary proficiency. Rogues, for one, because they're the skill-based class. So you're going to get legendary proficiency in perception. It's just going to be a thing. You're also going to have, I think, barbarians had some proficiency with perception. I would not be surprised if there were several druids that ended up capping out their perception, depending on what's going on in their campaign. But yeah, it should be pretty cool. And disabling the hazard, they're going to vary it up. So you don't have to have a rogue to disable all the hazards if you know what the hazard is. They talk about traps are usually disabled via thievery, environmental hazards via nature or survival, and haunts via occultism or religion. And I think it's good that they're giving us, as GMs and as players, a variety of different hazards, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about these traps. Because not all traps are going to be just, oh, you get caught in a mechanical thing, which was weird for like magical traps for a rogue to disable those. That's especially in a low magic setting, which Pathfinder is not, but or at least the standard Pathfinder Golarion is not a low magic setting. But thieves being able to just via some idea of thievery being able to do something about a magical trap always kind of struck me as odd, but understandable now that that may not be the case all the time. Occultism, religion, arcana, all those type of things could also work.
Seeing the traps, if you get to use them in a combat encounter, is going to be quite fun. It would have been last Friday I played a Dungeoneering Rogue, and in that session alone, using craft traps, I had like 7 or 8 IEDs traps go off, and it's fun using traps in combat. Especially if you are going up against like 30 or 40 foes against five players, and you have to kill things that are 2 tiers above you, effectively.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, yep. Traps are fun if you had the imagination for them.
It's a lot of stuff to play around with, and that's why I liked Haunts so much in 1E, was because the trap, in my opinion, is always like, it's this very mechanical springs and levers and gears and oops, that guy died. Whereas the haunt is like, you guys have had 2 in Lord of the Caliber, yeah, and it's just kind of like, whatever it is you want to do with them, just jam them in there and it can happen. And I'm super stoked to see him be like a mainstay, like this is how you deal with it. And I also like that you can't just respond to a haunt by like channel positive energy until you're out of channel positive energy and then the haunt goes away, which is how you dealt with them in first edition. Well, it's one of the ways you dealt with them.
As some of the haunts in the Occult Ventures and Undead, you actually have to go out of your way to actually kill them permanently. Which actually is one of my favorite things about Undead. They have more variety than the Outsiders for the type of lore behind each of them.
That is accurate.
Well, to be fair to the lore,
yes and no.
To be fair to the lore, a lot of those undead we see technically would be planar creatures if translated according to certain lore versus other certain lore. They're just easier to classify as undead for the purposes of mechanics. So there is that to think about.
One of my favorite undead. To physically defeat it, you have to actually give it a proper burial right away, or it comes back.
Mm-hmm. I believe I remember reading that one, but I don't remember what it is.
I think it's Fallen or one of those incorporeal undead.
Not sure.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but you got to find the body. Yeah, that's always funny. You have to find the body and give it a proper burial. I remember reading that, and I'm like, how are they going to find the body? So it just keeps coming. It is a haunt in and of itself. It just keeps coming back, and you're having to deal with it all this time.
At the GM, undead, they are one of my favorite monsters, next to demons and all the evil outsiders after that.
Oh, come on, Donald. Let's be honest now. Let's be honest with the viewers. Undead are your favorite thing, period.
Everything
for your characters.
My favorite thing.
There we go.
My favorite thing about undead is they generally don't have a unifying culture unless you're using a certain setting. But undead, you can make them as individual as much as they are individuals. So
that is quite true.
Not all liches are the same. Not all vampires are the same. Not all ghouls are the same. It's the environment that actually raise them and how they evolve and grow as an individual. So a ghoul from Tianzar, from Chiriax are two different ghouls if you actually RP with them.
Yeah, also I think there's an actual ghoul from the Dragon Empires. I know in Jade Region there's a lot, because they used a lot of them in the campaign. There's a lot of real big scary undead from Japanese mythology, like the Gakaduro or something like that, and it's gargantuan. And did you know Sorcerers came out in Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
Yes, we should definitely talk about the. We should talk about the Sorcerer, because the one bloodline, I definitely like the look of it.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of really crazy stuff here.
Last things with the traps then for people. The Hidden Pit, they have hazards, as you can see, because I'm recording where you can see. They have a hazard level, not a trap level or a haunt level, but it's a hazard level. Hazard level will keep it nice and standard for everybody. They've got mechanical, and they list off whether they're simple, complex, and what that does is simple traps are going to be ones that you can deal with outside of combat initiative. Complex traps,
like a reaction that triggers.
Right. Complex traps are going to be dealt with in initiative. So sometimes you're going to be in initiative for simple traps. You're going to be outside of initiative. The rogue can roll. But if it's something like, especially the Armageddon orb, I would classify that as a trap that is not, because it's pretty bad. 100-mile radius. If you kill whoever it's tied to or something like that, it's just nukes the area. And depending on how hurt you got during the encounter, that's going to be tough on you. And then the haunt highlighted was Bloodthirsty Urge, which encourages you to hurt yourself, and you can get it.
It's a pretty iconic one.
Mm-hmm.
Traps, based upon how the GM use them, they can be more hazardous than the actual enemies are at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do encourage everybody to look at the Spinning Blade Pillar. It's a hazard trap 4, and it apparently killed a rogue in the playtest with Paizo, but that's not super surprising. Rogues aren't very strong. But all that said, let's go ahead and use the rest of our time to talk about the spellcaster that was revealed, the Sorcerer. Okay, guys. Sorcerers are looking pretty dope.
So I have a lot to say. I've literally just started reading the blog, because usually I'll record my own video for BDG before I come here, and then I'll have my thoughts.
Which is a mistake. See, you should just come here first and then record, because then you get so much more. It's we
would, because I'm sitting here reading it. I'm seeing the bloodlines that we're gonna see. I scrolled past it. Where did it go? There's just a small smattering of them.
4, I think, or
but
5.
The important bit is you're going to see all the casting types in the
Aberrant.
Sorcerer.
Aberrant for occult.
Which gives us occult casting. And then, like, the Angelic Demonic gives us divine, and Draconic Imperial has, like, arcane magic as we know it from the Sorcerer now. And then the Fey Bloodline gives you primal. I think this is very telling of what we're going to see with our, with the Oracle, with the Psychic, I'm seeing some people talk about, like, maybe this is the future of the Shaman, perhaps even the Witch a little. I don't necessarily look at that far, because the Witch is really powerful.
I think that
a lot of classes are getting, like, into the Sorcerer, it feels like to me.
I'll make a prediction right now. I am predicting that the Bard will take over the Witch's Hex and Misfortune to be its substitute for its bardic, as a part of its bardic performance abilities. That it will be able to
I could
misfortune
definitely
or fortune.
see that.
But that's not the Sorcerer.
It's not. The Sorcerer is... I've been talking about it a little. Like, I know there's a guy over on my channel who's commented, and he's always talking about, like, my predictions for the Oracle, and I've said that maybe it'll get rolled into the Sorcerer. And, like, we haven't seen a curse yet, and Adam and I were talking about this before we started recording, and we're thinking maybe, like, the curses might be an archetype that one can take, accept the curse, and then, like, take other feats later to develop it. But I'm pretty sure this is where we're going to see, like, all of the spontaneous casters just Sorcerer, which is kind of cool because, like, I won't necessarily call it bloat, but a lot of them were the same flavor as the Sorcerer, and if we can... It's kind of like killing two birds with one stone.
One thing that I actually like about the Bloodline that the preview shows was based upon what the demonic Bloodline you actually go with for the flavor, you can have a variety of spells that change a bit based upon demon type. One thing when I did GM for players who did use the Inferno or any of the evil outsiders bloodline, I did allow them to change some of the spells up to show what type of outsider heritage that the bloodline had. So a demon bloodline would be different from a demon to a infernal bloodline for the type of outsiders, for the variation of these spells you choose.
Mm-hmm. And Paizo has been fairly good about giving a lot of bloodlines for the different things. I think it will be important in 2nd edition, since there's going to be so much emphasis put on how, for lack of a better word, varied your characters are. How customizable your characters are. Demonic is fine to start with, like in the playtest. I think having these 5 to work with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to work with, is great. There will be more, I'm sure, in the actual
in like the book after the playtest is over.
Right.
Yeah.
But this gives you a taste of all the different casting types, and it gives you 2 very common ones for this particular type of player too, which would probably be angelic or demonic, because demonic gets some glutton's jaws that are pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Did you mean to say pretty ghoul? Because that was
pretty
a wonderful pun.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
But
hey, that's a necromancy spell. If you can not be terrible like me and not think it's fireball and somehow wizard sorcerer multi-class, which I really want to know how to multi-class in 2nd edition because it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
You could gain even more hit points off of glutton's jaws, which is super scary. Well, that's a power. It might not count as a spell.
Yep. But I think Paizo's been good about giving us several different types of bloodlines, and it's going to be important for character customization that demonic is not the same as devil, is not the same as daemon, like Donald was pointing out. It doesn't need to be the same. It needs to be different. Especially when you go and look at how much they affect your spellcasting as well, because they don't like it shows it here, and like we mentioned, aberrant gives you occult spellcasting. It doesn't give you arcane spellcasting. It gives you occult spellcasting. So you're going to have a different list to draw off of. just like with angelic and angelic and demonic, you're going to get divine spells instead of arcane spells. So you're going to draw off the different list.
Off the cleric list?
Probably. So you're going to have those things.
Now it's a list for everybody.
Like if you want to play a fae, if you want to play a druid that's not a druid mechanically, but he or she is from the woods and they live in the woods because their blood naturally draws them to there and stuff like that, then you're going to want to play the Fae Sorcerer and you're going to get primal casting. Tommy will be pleased that they'll probably bring out a Green Faith or a Gosrin flavored creature, bloodline in the future. So it does mention that Sione is a Imperial bloodline, for those wondering.
Looking at all the bloodlines now, this is probably a prediction for when the playtests get more refined. These bloodlines are just going to be examples, so you could easily have a aberrant and then have access to divination spells or something like that to suit the game.
Mm-hmm.
That might be possible. It's hard to say. I think you'd sooner see like a not aberrant, but like a dark tapestry bloodline or something like that would give you access to divine casting for like the scion of the great old ones on Galarion, that kind of thing, which would be sweet. But that's occult casting. You imagine the occult casting will have like divination spells in it because the psychics do in first edition now.
I think they'll have a mix. Yeah, I think you'll have arcanes. I think you'll have divines, and I think that occult and primal are going to mix the two, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays up for the bard and how that plays up for all the spellcasters that get access to occult spellcasting or divine or primal spellcasting.
Right. So it looks like also, as I'm flipping through this, the sorcerer is learning spells at the same rate that the wizard is now. So there's no longer, if I remember correctly, the sorcerer got the spells faster, I think, than the wizard did. I could be wrong.
No, the wizard got the variety of spells faster, but the sorcerer got the amount of spells per day faster.
Yes, the sorcerers were the one that at every level, every even level after what would be normal prepared casters, they get access to those spells, but got them more. So sorcerers were better in certain areas, as they could just spam the same spells over again.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. I imagine the sorcerer will still be, because you're still a spontaneous caster, you don't have a spell book, you're going to have that, like I want to cast A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and go into combat with them. It's just there's no, like, the mechanical disparity between the wizard and the sorcerer is beginning to do this. I think the wizard's still a little bit up here in terms of the fact that, like, spell books are a thing, but also, it's very worth noting to say that the sorcerer alongside the bard will be the two classes that, without somebody having to jump through hoops, like, they're going to have the most resonance. Easy peasy, because it's part of the class.
You do have to remember that there's no negatives, as with what we saw with the ability scores, unless you take a class, unless you take a race, that has a negative to its charisma, which you may or may not.
Dwarves.
Yeah. Because we haven't seen the half races yet, which, again, I'll point that out. I don't know that there's going to be half races in the same sense we saw them in the past. I think that you're either going to have a dominant bloodline like elf or orc, and that's going to be kind of it. But that's a dubious prediction. I do hope that there are half races, that the bastard races get in, or that they give you an option for them in some way. But that aside, the fact that they're a spontaneous spellcaster and they progress as a sorcerer, as a wizard would, I do have some concerns that in most campaigns, people are going to opt for sorcerer over wizard, because unless the GM really thinks about it or bothers to look at the possible disparities in what spells are available, there's always going to be better spells than others. Fly is always a good spell. Grease, always a good spell, because it can keep you from getting grappled and stuff like that. Which we haven't seen how grappling is going to work either. Please make it work make it work good enough that someone can build around it effectively without having to take an archetype, please. Paizo. Because I like to grapple.
Or have a really, really, really powerful animal companion.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I do hope that they refine, wizards playing with them and GMs in the past, wizards are resource dependent, like the alchemists or any other class that requires access to a lot of resources for them to be good. So sorcerers, unless if wizards is continue to be on par as a sorcerer is, I see the sorcerer being the superior choice for most games.
The game you will have, like Adam is saying, we're not gonna, you won't see players dump Chaw to 7 anymore because it's no longer mechanically viable. But the sorcerer and the bard, those are the classes that they want to have a high charisma, especially the sorcerer's spell DCs are keyed to charisma. You want to have that 18 charisma. Ergo, the sorcerer will have more resonance for wands and scrolls and things, which it makes them feel kind of more powerful, but at the same time, the wizard's versatility, I feel like that wins. I don't know, it's hard to say. What I don't like is I don't see, as I'm flipping through here, I don't see Bloodline Arcana for the sorcerer, that's a huge selling point for me in first edition, so much so that every single solitary one of my casters, even if that caster had 7 charisma, he'd dip sorcerer because there'd be some Bloodline Arcana that would be beneficial to him. Because the Bloodline Arcana doesn't say when you cast a sorcerer spell, it says when you cast a spell. And I don't see that here now.
I think they're going with something more along Bloodline powers.
Yeah, we had powers in first edition too. That's the thing. You had both
right,
existed.
You get a separate spell point reserve to cast your powers with. So they may be more keen to powers than just flat bloodlines. Because you're right, we don't see it in here, but it will prevent that single dipping that you're talking about.
That is very true. And we've seen that with the Paladin changing the way it's changing. It's no longer mechanically beneficial for every blaster caster to dip cross-blooded or draconic. Every enchanter dips Fey or Infernal, and so on and so forth for the really sweet buff that you get from that Bloodline Arcana.
Right. And I'm hoping, I'm not sure, because versatility is nice, but the problem is that sorcerers cast spontaneously. If they can cast about the same, they can... Casting spontaneously will make a big deal, I think, in 2nd edition, because spontaneously, when you're talking about having 3 different modes of play, unless you're specifically getting enough downtime in that dungeon, then you're not a combat caster. You are a utility caster. And that's kind of what Wizards fell into when it boiled down to it. They controlled the battlefield. And that was their job, control the battlefield. They were not blaster casters, which they may be able to do and fill that niche still. They probably can.
You totally could build a blaster wizard if you really wanted to.
Yep. You can. You have to finagle it. You can't... If it was a choice between a vanilla sorcerer as a blaster caster or a vanilla wizard as a blaster caster, you would go with sorcerer because they can just blast all the time. And then
too could the wizard, though, if he prepped all his fireballs the way a blaster would. And I forget what evocationists get off the top of my head. I don't remember.
But then
Way of Fire.
But that defeats the purpose of the wizard's versatility then. Because if they're prepping,
you're not wrong. But there are some people There's some people who will play the wizard and not play to its versatility. They want to do it. For example, oh god, I really wish I could remember what the evocation. I think the evocation wizard let you overcome some resistances.
First, we're talking about second edition wizard, right?
We're talking about the first edition education as wizard.
You
would know.
Evocation specialists, if I recall correctly, they get to add half of their level on top of Ray's Ray attacks. That's pretty good for someone who.
Yeah, they did some good stuff as choosing an evocation wizard, and that's what I mean. You sacrificed one of the key features of being a wizard to be a blaster wizard, which is not something you had to do to be a battlefield control wizard. You could still blast as a battlefield control wizard, but you mainly controlled the battlefield. And that's not necessarily what happens when you get a blaster caster sorcerer. So I don't know. There's lots of ways you can build.
Like, by that same notion, the sorcerer got more spells per day. So like I've played sorcerers before that were Draconic Bloodline. That's my channel's named after a Draconic Bloodline sorcerer that I played once, and he was real good at elemental spell Fireball to throw acid damage at people and watch the numbers go up. But like I still had Hold Person, I still had Grease, I still had. I think I only ever resolved it the once because we leveled really fast, but I still had Color Spray and all of that too. It's still there.
Right.
One of my other favorite powers that the Evocation School First Edition wizard did get was Force Missile for a 3+ your intelligent mod per day use. It was pretty good.
It was to say nothing of the Siege Mage's ability to blast. Oh man, if we TPK before we get to level 10, I'll never get to have my Siege Mage.
Siege mages and evocation mages, as long as you make them properly, they're a blast to play, especially the big AoE spells if you build into that.
Right. But getting back to second edition, I'm not sure with the way crafting works what role the wizard will fall into or the sorcerer will fall into versus each other, because there will always be that competition between the two, and the bard kind of sits on the sidelines and enjoys the show of those two fighting over who's better at what they do,
mechanically better,
and he just enjoys it, which is another reason, Paizo, I want to see the bards before we actually hit the playtest, which would be nice. We've only got like 6 or 7.
I think that's going to be next week. Just calling it
so.
now. I'm probably going to do the bard next week.
I either want to see bards next week or the half races. Give me the bastard races or the bards. That would be good.
Why can't we have both?
One of my favorite bards that I ever did play, this was me playing in a Oriental type of campaign for a short-term game for a few sessions, and I got to play what would be a geisha, or one of the Asian courtesans. I think called
geisha?
Yeah.
Geisha.
Yes. So playing that type of bard is quite fun. The host entertainer consult type.
It's a good one, especially if you go Vishkanya. You can get some fun things to happen with that. I think they have an archetype that's called courtesan or something.
Yeah, they do. Bards are one of my favorite classes, as you can make bards into what you need to be effectively, as long as you know what you're going after.
Yeah.
Another bard.
No bards. We got to save the bards. We got to save the bards for the bard talk. Yeah. But the sorcerer feats are going to look pretty cool. And these, again, I'm not sure if they have equivalent feats for the wizard. That would be very interesting. The overwhelming spell looks like it will be very good for if you get stuck. Like if you are a fire mage trying to kill a red dragon, you're probably, and it's kind of like a young or a middle red dragon, it's going to have some fire resistance, if not immunity. But this will bump it down to, you'll ignore the first 10 of its resistance to fire, which would be nice if it only has resistance.
It's real good against outsiders.
And outsiders.
Because that's like everything in the game at high level has some kind of resistance to fire.
Or some element.
most creatures after like CR 10 and above, they have DR, especially if we're talking about outsiders.
Yeah. But they've got some nice stuff going for them. Of the spellcasters we've seen so far, this is likely to be the one that's played most, in my opinion. I think people will play Sorcerers more than they will play Wizards if they're trying to go for combat. I think that the Wizard, the way they presented them anyway, has been presented as more of the crafter person, which may be their edge to getting played versus the Sorcerer. But with everybody being able to take the crafting stuff, I don't know. Everybody can craft now, so it's going to be a little different in the meta. And if you've got a fighter, he can just invest in, and he doesn't need the feats. He can just invest in all those crafting feats himself and just have you hang around to cast something when he needs it. I mean, that's kind of how it's built around.
One thing I haven't seen in the blogs about the Wizard and Sorcerer yet is if there's going to be armor failure or penalties wearing armor for magic casters.
There's proficiency, is how they're working it. Proficiency will give you, I think, from what I'm remembering, if you have, like, they don't have any armor training. So they're not going, it doesn't matter if they're wearing armor or not, they're not going to get any real benefit out of it. Unless it's like a +3 armor, then they're getting a +1 or something like that when they wear it untrained, which is going to keep them from wanting to wear the armor in the first place. Plus, it's going to occupy bulk, and they may want their bulk for something else because their strength score is going to indicate how much bulk they can use. And if they don't have a big strength score, yeah, because if they have a 10 strength score, or even an 8 strength score, they could have an 8 strength score if you're optimizing your race. Then that means they're going to be carrying less bulk, and everything's broken down into bulk now. So it's going to take 1 bulk, 5 bulk, 1 bulk, 2 bulk for these for this armor. And if they do piecemeal armor, which I've always been fascinated by but have not tried out, might try it out some in 2nd edition if it's a thing. If they do piecemeal armor, where you get a certain bonus for the breastplate and a certain bonus for the greaves and a certain bonus for the helmet, that might be interesting. But they haven't decided that. And the proficiency is going to keep you, I think, from, if you're untrained, you're going to take a penalty to do stuff in the armor. So, just anything, just doing stuff is going to give you a bit of a penalty. So.
For certain builds, if you build into being proficient, even with light armor for a sorcerer, a melee touch spell focused sorcerer wearing something as simple as light armor, that's a fun build right there.
Oh, I've seen it happen. Yeah, Kane played it. Lots of shocking grasp.
But the issue with that there. But the issue with that build is you have to actually spec into it to be good. But afterwards, it's a fun build for that purpose. But
it doesn't necessarily take a lot of specking either, because you can get the aberrant and stay, at reach. So
and have long arms and be spooky and shocking grasp people. Yeah.
So there's that.
The sorcerer, looking at all the bloodlines, is probably going to be a catch-all class for the type of magic you would be using when it comes to just the spontaneous caster.
Yeah, I also like, we didn't bring this up, but I like the signature skills for the sorcerer, because we had that ish in 1st edition. Your sorcerer got class skills based on his or her bloodline. Now it's signature skills like we see the cleric based on the cleric's deity. And I think that's really cool, and it continues to play up the, not all sorcerers are created equal because of their bloodline. So, for example, Demonic's got athletics, deception, intimidation, and religion, whereas you imagine angelic would turn intimidation into diplomacy and deception into like a knowledge check or something. I don't know. I'm not entirely 100 off the top of my head, but the point is, or even like the Fey Bloodline probably has stealth and thievery and stuff. So there's your like arcane trickster, for lack of a better thing to call it, like right there in the class.
Yeah, stealth, thievery, deception, something like that.
That feels right for the Fae. And that's a spontaneous druid. That is super cool. That is...
Yeah.
I'm probably playing that at some point because I like druids. That's my favorite caster.
See, you want me to make...
Spontaneously.
You want me to make our eventual 2nd edition campaign game more deadly just so you can get to play more of the different classes you want to play? I'm like, okay, Adam,
yes.
Kill us now.
Yes. Or just like, don't necessarily even make them deadly, but when you do your 2E games, like make them like 2 or 3 shots or like 5 shots so we can like get our hands on this.
It is going to fit into that story-esque ability to be able to have different people come in and out. But
sweet.
Another class that I'm sort of psyched to see how they go with it is the occult classes.
Well, technically, the sorcerer is one now.
Yeah. So I guess one has to assume then, because it's like it's intrinsic to the playtest rulebook, that like, does that mean the bard is an occult caster?
He'll probably be arcane. Well, he'll probably be arcane, or he'll probably pick schools like they do in 5th edition.
First edition, technically Bard magic fall under Arcane, and then Druid magic fall under Divine. It's sort of odd how those 2 classes for magic fall under.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I wonder why we have, other than the Sorcerer, just to demonstrate that it's there. Like, I wonder how the Bard is gonna, like, mesh. And sometimes I even wonder if the Bard will retain spellcasting, or if it will just be, like, spell points galore to buff and debuff, which I think honestly would be even cooler.
I don't know.
Like how the Ranger has lost spellcasting.
Like you said, the Ranger lost spellcasting, but gained some cool stuff
for it. A lot more, so it's playable. I will take my spellcasting. Let me play this class.
Yeah, they gave the Ranger classic Smite and gave a new version of Smite to the Paladin. So, I mean, yeah, but with the inclusion of the different, getting back to sorcerers, with the inclusion of the different meta magic feats and stuff like that, I wasn't considering, like I probably should have, the school magic for the wizard. I believe we had some talk about that it was fairly good. So as long as they're comparable to the blood lines and they don't overlap, because that can be a thing. Because when you looked in 1st edition, there were literally sorcerer archetypes that said you pick it and it's basically like being a wizard. And I never really liked that you could pick a sorcerer archetype that basically made you a wizard, or a wizard archetype that made you a sorcerer. Just play one or the other. And at least that's how I looked at it. And that's
which archetypes do you mean specifically that did that?
There's a archetype for the sorcerer.
I know there's a bloodline for sorcerers that lets them cast off their intelligence.
Yeah, they basically cast off their intelligence and use a spell book. And then there's yeah, I believe there was a archetype.
What was that bloodline called?
A bloodline.
It's a wild-blooded sorcerer.
And then there was a wizard that had you running like a sorcerer, kind of, which I never really thought. I mean, like, just play one or the other, or multi-class.
I think we should have had some Arcanist. What is the Arcanist?
Yeah, the Arcanist is that's what the sorcerer doesn't feel like an Arcanist to me. It feels like a sorcerer. The wizard feels more like a Arcanist than the sorcerer does to me. But again, the Arcanist had modular spell slots. It does use some odd wording when it talks about spells and preparations of the day. It uses that phrasing, preparations or preparing for their day. There are going to be some things they need to prepare and some things they don't.
I imagine that means like investment.
Yeah, perhaps that's what they're referring to. resonance and investing it. It made it sound weird. But you're right, that's probably what they're referring to. And we have a little bit of time, so I would like to say, Wayne Reynolds, nice job on the Sione art. I like it quite a bit. I like the redo.
Looks a lot.
Her staff is just magnificent. Her clothes are just the right amount of cloth, methinks, for Sione.
Mm-hmm.
Character design definitely very suiting for the character, especially for the culture that character came from. It's more closed, but probably still the same amount of clothing is on her from the.
She still looks very, very Varisian. She just she's not incredibly over sexualized like one Sione was.
Well,
that was Joe and I used to go back and forth on that in our in-person because we have a GM screen. Where is that GM screen? I have no idea. Joe, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I've misplaced all our in-person stuff. Regardless, it had all of the core the core classes along it, and Sione's on there, and we all know that how she dressed in first edition. It became just a topic of hilarity for me and Joe and a couple other people in our in-person because it's not even attractive, but she's still presented as super over-sexualized, and now she looks more like an actual person who might dress instead of somebody who's I'm gonna go wandering in a dungeon where there are monsters that will eat me. Better expose all of my skin.
Oh, that's right.
She had that female armor syndrome real bad.
When it comes to female armor, from my experience GMing, it's either there's too much armor, or there's not enough, or there's just enough armor to give you a real sense of armor protection for AC.
Well, in Paizo's defense, they did a definitely good job with the paladin. Her armor was pretty much that's an on-point armor. I think Wayne Reynolds did her art too, if I remember right.
Yeah, Wayne did all the core races, God damn it, I did it twice. Wayne did all the iconics. I'm pretty sure.
Did he? I'm not sure that he did Sione.
I'm 99% sure.
Oh yeah, they mentioned that they said, "Hey, give us some art," and then they were like, "That's why Valoros uses sword and board now, because they told him, hey, he needs to use sword and board instead of two-handed, because two-handed's not very good, not as good as it could be in Pathfinder First Edition."
I think it's more that the concept of the shield in Second Edition is just so much better.
Well, no, they said they actually said that they told him, give us some cool-looking characters for a fighter or a sorcerer, and they named off the classes, and so he did, and he made Valoros a two-handed fighter, and they were like, well, dang, now we have to make Valoros a two-handed fighter. But
two-handed fighting, I'm actually curious with the feats that they will go with the fighter for that type of archetype, because two-weapon fighting, I actually like the concept of it.
To be honest, what I think I'm going to try to do when we get around to it at some point, I'm going to build the TWF character in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but I imagine, especially on a fighter, it'll be like a sword and board TWF where I'm bash your face in, stab you, then raise my shield.
Spike shield type stuff?
Shields are just so good. Yeah.
That's cool. That's definitely a thing. And you can do that. You can do the shield bash thing and stuff with the reactions that they get. I think that was something that we talked about with the fighters. How many reactions are we going to get? Usually it's one per round, but are you going to be able to expand that? That will be something to think about.
I think if anybody is, it'll be the fighter. And I hope you can, because that'll be the good class, is the one that gets 4 or 5 reactions. That's probably too many. Not 4 or 5. 2 or 3.
Having feats to increase the number of actions you can do in a turn would be a good idea to have. Even if you do sink 3 feats in to get up to 6 actions per turn, that's a good feat investment for the build.
Yeah, that's definitely worth 3 feats for sure.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can expand your action economy, it's usually a good idea.
Win.
But
dual wielding, if you do it right, it is quite a fun build. One of my favorite 5e builds had a pretty high AC while dual wielding two weapons. Fun time to be had dual wielding if you build them right.
Seems good.
Oh, I can't believe we haven't mentioned yet about Glutton's Jaws, a bloodline power that you can spend a spell point for. It's necromancy. Casting is a somatic and a verbal, and it lasts for 1 minute. So you basically cast this at the front of a combat, and you're good for the combat. And you basically get an unarmed attack that you can bite with that has the finesse trait. So you can use Dex for it, which continues to seem to make Dex the master stat again, though we're not sure how all of it's going to interact, so perhaps it's just going to be one of the best stats to have instead of the best. But we'll see. The enhancement...
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to pull the trigger on Dex as the uber stat of 2nd edition. It's probably good.
Probably good. But considering that you can use armor more effectively now, with shields and stuff, and that proficiency being so good, it may balance it out. I think they talked about that in one of their video logs. But the thing to point out with Glutton's Jaws, along with everything it seems in Pathfinder 2nd edition, it has scales to it. So if you can it can be heightened to 2nd, 4th, 6th, or 8th, depending on what you can cast, what your highest level of thing you can cast is, and it scales up for you automatically. So you're getting at maximum at heightened 8th, you get a +4 weapon potency rune on your Jaws, and a temporary hit points increase of 5d4 when you hit effectively with it. So that's pretty strong.
Super good.
All right, we are about at time. So, any final remarks about traps, hazards, or the sorcerer?
Traps, they are definitely a must-use in 2nd edition if you have the opportunity for the pure amount of damage you can do potentially with them.
If you can make them work, they seem like a good idea.
And you can make them do whatever you want, because they're very mutable and very, they have a stat block like monsters.
Well,
so
the GM
it becomes
can.
a lot easier to build them.
The GM can. I'm not so sure about the player.
I really do. I really wonder if the Ranger will have access to that level of traps. Probably not.
I don't. The Armageddon orb. The Armageddon orb looks like an artifact of some kind.
It is important.
I'm telling you, Tommy.
I need to kill everyone in the world but the players.
But
I'm not even that. I don't need the Armageddon orb. It'd be nice. But to build the spinny death spike thing. I forget exactly what it's called, but if I can build that,
a spinning
on the Ranger,
blade pillar.
That seems super cool.
And as long as I get to make firebolt traps or cone of cold traps, I'm happy.
Or what about a cleric that can make haunts? Can we have that? That'd be so cool. A cleric of Asmodeus or Zonkathon or any of the bottom third, or not even the bottom third, because clerics or deities are changing who they hand their spells out to, which is terrifying. Down here, just make the suicide compulsion haunt that's so prevalent in the APs of 1st edition, and we see it just right at the gate here in 2nd edition.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be sweet. I don't know how you're feeding it to the bad guys, but it's a tabletop role-playing game. The ability to do it is there.
And another trap is that if I get access to making it, it would be the finger of death trap.
Well, that's going to have everything's going to have scales of success. So that's something to consider, including traps. But all that said, traps are good. If you can get them used in an effective way, traps are good. If you have a large open map, you're going to have a bit more trouble. But that may just be me coming from a game that has both in and outdoor stuff, and those traps would have been useless outdoors. They would have been great indoors. So it just depends.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just how it is. And the Sorcerers, all in all, like the Sorcerer. I'm hoping that there's not too much too much of someone else's pie getting eaten by sorcerers and wizards and their constant competition. But we'll find out. We'll find out. And we'll probably find out more when the bard drops, and we'll probably find out more about the races when they drop. But that is all we have for now, travelers. We hope you had a wonderful time with us in our discussion. Have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Nailed it. He got it twice.
This content was made possible by the generous support of patrons and travelers like you. Thank you.